Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel MR.Creepy N. So today's video is definitely going to creep you out. In this video, we're getting into 8 real stories from people who stopped at a gas station and found out that the most dangerous place on a dark highway isn't the road itself. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. If you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to like the video and subscribe. Alright, let's get into tonight's stories. I'm a long-haul truck dispatcher from Knoxville. I don't drive the routes anymore, haven't in 11 years, but 6 weeks ago I was behind the wheel again, covering for one of my guys who'd called in sick on a Tuesday night run to Louisville. I'd forgotten what it feels like out there after midnight. You forget how absolute the dark gets when there's nothing on either side of the road but tree line. I always stop at the same kind of station when I drive. Nothing fancy, nothing with a car wash attached. If the lot isn't lit well enough to read a license plate, I keep moving. It's a rule I made for myself years ago, and I never broke it. That night I broke it. The station off exit 141 on I-75 had one working overhead light above pump 2. The others were dark. I could see the glow of the store from where I pulled in, and the pumps were the old kind, the ones that don't take cards, that force you inside to prepay. I was low enough on fuel that I didn't have a choice. I told myself it was fine. It was a Tuesday night. Nothing happens on a Tuesday night. I got out and stood for a second, the way you do when you've been sitting for 3 hours and your legs need a moment to remember what they're for. The air smelled like pine resin and old asphalt. There was no wind. The lot was completely still. And then I noticed the man at pump 3. He was just standing there, not pumping, not on his phone, not leaning against a car, just standing with both hands at his sides, facing the tree line at the far edge of the lot. His back was to me. He hadn't moved since I pulled in. I watched him for probably 30 seconds, and he didn't shift his weight, didn't scratch his neck, didn't do anything a person standing outside does naturally. He was as still as the air. I told myself he was probably finishing a call, or just spacing out the way you do on a long drive. I've pulled over and stared at nothing for 5 minutes before. It means nothing. I went inside, prepaid $40 on pump 2, grabbed a coffee I didn't need, and came back out. He was still there, same position, same stillness. I had been inside for at least 4 minutes. I know because the cashier was slow, and I watched the clock above the register climb from 12:14 to 12:18, and he had not moved once. I started pumping and kept him in my peripheral vision. There was no car near pump 3, no vehicle anywhere close to where he was standing, just the man and the dark and the tree line he was staring at. Then he turned around. Not slowly, not the way you turn when you've heard something. He turned the way a door swings, smoothly, completely, like it was mechanical. And he looked directly at me, not in my direction, directly at me, like he had known exactly where I was standing the whole time without needing to look. His face was wrong in a way I am still not able to describe accurately, not disfigured, not injured, just arranged incorrectly, like someone had described a human face to an artist who had never seen one. My hand tightened around the pump handle. The numbers on the display were climbing, and I focused on them the way you focus on something ordinary when your body is trying to tell you something your brain hasn't caught up to yet. He took one step toward me, then stopped. I pulled the nozzle out before the tank was full. I don't know exactly how much fuel I left in the ground. Maybe $6 worth, maybe $8. I screwed the cap on and got back in the cab. My hands were steady. That surprised me. Everything else had gone cold. My chest, the back of my neck, the skin along my forearms. But my hands were steady, and I was grateful for that, because I needed them. I pulled out of the lot without looking back, except I did look back. Once, in the side mirror, just before the station disappeared behind a curve, he was standing at the edge of the lot now, not where he'd been. He'd crossed the full width of the lot in the time it took me to pull out and reach the exit. Maybe 15 seconds, maybe 20. He was standing at the road's edge, watching the truck. I have driven through the night hundreds of times. I have had tires blow at 70 miles an hour. I have jackknifed once on black ice outside of Cincinnati, and walked away from it. None of those things did what that drive to Louisville did. I had the heat on full, and I was cold the entire way. I reported it the next morning. The county dispatcher I spoke to was polite and took the information and told me they'd send a car to check the area. 3 days later, I called back. They had no record of my original call. The woman I spoke to the second time said she'd log it and follow up. She never did. I gave up my Tuesday night driving cover after that. Told my guy he needed to find his own backup. He thought I was annoyed at him. I let him think that. I still do the same check every time I stop now. Scope the lot before I get out. Confirm the overhead lighting. Confirm exit lanes are clear. I've done it for 11 years. It never felt like anything more than habit before that night. Now it feels like the only thing standing between me and whatever was standing at pump 3. I haven't driven I-75 after dark since. I don't think I will again. I'm a pediatric nurse from Memphis, and I've worked night shifts for going on 7 years. I know what exhaustion looks like. I know what sleep deprivation does to your perception, how it softens the edges of things, how it makes you second-guess what you saw. I say that because it matters for what I'm about to tell you. This happened 8 months ago, on my drive home after a 12-hour shift. It was just past 3 a.m. I'd taken the back route home, Highway 51, the one that runs through the flat stretch of farmland between the hospital and my neighborhood. No street lights, no shoulders worth mentioning. Just 2 lanes of asphalt cutting through fields that go dark and absolute. The second the sun goes down, I needed gas, and the only station on that stretch is the Shell at the Millington Road intersection. I'd stopped there 100 times, maybe more. I knew the cashier's name. I knew they kept the coffee fresh until 4 a.m. because I'd asked once. I pulled in, got out, and slid my card into the pump the way I had done every time before. That was the last ordinary moment of that stop. The station had 2 sides, pumps on the east facing the highway, and a narrow overflow lot on the west side that nobody used except trucks that needed to turn around. There was a single fluorescent fixture mounted on the west wall of the store, and that night it was flickering, not in a rhythm, irregularly. On for 3 seconds, off for 1, on for half a second, off for 4. The kind of flickering that makes the eye keep moving back to it, even when you don't want it to. I was watching the pump display when I noticed her. A woman was standing in the overflow lot, on the west side, near the far edge of the light's reach. She was wearing a pale yellow coat, the kind with a wide collar, the kind you see in photos from the 70s, and she was standing completely still, facing the store, not the pumps, the store. She was maybe 60 feet away. I thought she was waiting for someone inside. I thought her car had broken down, and she was deciding whether to go in. I thought of 12 things, and none of them felt fully right, but all of them were possible. I am a person who runs through explanations systematically before I allow myself to react. That is the job. That is 7 years of night shifts. I finished pumping and went inside to get my coffee. I told myself I'd check if she was still there when I came out, and if she was, I'd ask if she needed help. That's what a person does. The cashier, his name is Raymond, was behind the counter reading. I poured my coffee, put the lid on, and said, "Hey Raymond, is that woman okay out there? The one in the overflow lot?" He looked up. "What woman?" "Yellow coat, west side. She's been standing there." He came out from behind the counter and looked through the window with me. The overflow lot was empty. I had been inside for maybe 3 minutes. The lot was visible from where I'd stood at the pump the entire time I was filling the tank. I had not seen her walk away. The overflow lot has one exit back onto the highway, and it was directly in my line of sight from pump 4. She had not walked past me. She had not gotten into a car. There was no car. Raymond said she was probably just someone who cut through on foot. He said it the way you say something when you want to end a conversation that's making you uncomfortable. I drove home. I made myself drive the speed limit the whole way, which is harder than it sounds at 3 a.m., when every instinct is telling you to move faster. I thought about her for days. I'm trained to observe. In triage, you read people in seconds, color, posture, gait, breathing pattern. I had looked directly at her for a sustained period of time across 60 feet of lit space. She was not a trick of the flickering light. She was not a shape I'd misread. She was a woman in a yellow coat, standing still and watching the store. And then she was gone without using the only exit available to her. I went back the next afternoon. Daylight, different feel, and I walked the overflow lot. Measured it with my eyes. One entrance from the highway. The west wall of the store on one side. A chain link fence on the other two sides. No gaps in the fence. No gate, no way through to the field beyond it without climbing, and I would have heard that. I told myself the reasonable explanation was probably true. I told myself that maybe 200 times since. I still stop at that shell. Raymond is still there. The coffee is still fresh until 4 a.m. But I don't look at the overflow lot anymore. That's new. I get out, I pump, I go inside, and I keep my eyes on the store and the highway and the display on the pump. I do it deliberately. I have made a choice not to look at that side of the building, and I make that choice every single time. That's the part I can't fully justify to myself. If it was nothing, if she was just a person who'd walked through, then not looking doesn't mean anything. It's just a habit. But if it wasn't nothing, then not looking is the only thing I know how to do. And I'm a person who, when I don't know what to do, does the one thing that makes it possible to keep going. So I don't look. And I haven't since. And I'm a high school history teacher from Baton Rouge, and I coached junior varsity baseball for 6 years before my knee finally told me it was done. This happened last March, on a Friday night, after an away game in Slidell. The bus had already taken the team back. I'd stayed behind to talk to the opposing coach about a kid we both thought had a shot at a scholarship, and by the time I got in my car, it was close to midnight. The drive back on I-10 was the kind of quiet that feels earned after a long week. Windows up, radio low, the particular piece of a person heading home who has nothing left to do that day. I noticed my tank was under a quarter, and I didn't want to think about gas in the morning. So I took the Pontchartrain Drive exit and pulled into the first station I saw. A Texaco sitting alone at the edge of the off-ramp. The kind of place that exists purely for people passing through and has no reason to be charming about it. It was the van that I noticed first. A dark green minivan parked facing the air pump on the far side of the lot. Engine running, no one inside that I could see. Not at the pumps. Not in the driver's seat. Not in any of the rear seats. Just a running van with the parking lights on, sitting there like someone had stepped away for 1 minute, and that 1 minute had stretched into something longer. I parked at pump 1, got out, and started filling up. I kept looking at the van. I am someone who notices things out of place. 30 years of a classroom will do that to you. You develop a permanent radar for the thing that doesn't fit, and a running, empty van at midnight fits nowhere in the category of ordinary. I told myself the driver was inside paying. I looked at the store. I could see the cashier behind the counter from where I stood. There was no one else inside. The driver had been gone long enough for the cashier to be alone again. Long enough for the engine to still be running. I finished pumping and went inside. Bought a water, the same brand I always buy. A habit my wife started. She says the others taste like plastic. And while I was at the counter, I said to the cashier, "You know who belongs to that green van out there?" He was maybe 19. He looked at the van through the window and shook his head. Guy came in about 20 minutes ago. Bought a Red Bull. Went back out. He hasn't left. The cashier looked again. Huh. That was all he said. Huh. I took my water and went back to my car. I walked past the van slowly, close enough to see inside clearly. The keys were in the ignition. The passenger seat had a child's backpack on it, the small kind, with cartoon characters on it. Zipper half open. There was a juice box on the floor, straw still in it. My stomach dropped before my brain finished processing what I was looking at. I stood there for a moment. I looked at the tree line behind the station. There was nothing. No movement, no sound, no light. Just the dark and the drone of the highway above the off-ramp. I called out. Not a name. I didn't have one. Just a hello, loud enough to carry. Nothing came back. I went inside and told the cashier to call 911. He looked at me like I was the problem. I told him again, slower, and said that the child's belongings were in a running vehicle with no adult present, and that the adult had been gone for at minimum 20 minutes. He picked up his phone. I went back outside and stood next to the van. I did not want to. Every part of me wanted to get in my car and drive home to my wife and my house and my life. I want to be honest about that. I stayed because of the backpack, because it was the same size as the ones my students carry in the halls, because I know what a child's belongings look like when a child was recently using them. The police arrived in 14 minutes. I know because I counted. I stood at that van for 14 minutes in a gas station lot at midnight on a Friday, and I counted every one of them. They searched the tree line with flashlights. They ran the plates. The van was registered to a man named Dale Pryor, 38, from Metairie. They found him 11 minutes after that. Not in the trees, not on the road. He was behind a station, in the narrow maintenance corridor between the back wall and the fence. He was sitting against the wall, with his knees up and his head down. He was unresponsive, not unconscious. He responded to the officers, but unresponsive in the way a person gets when something has happened to them that their body is still catching up to. He was shaking. He had no injuries. He could not tell the officers what had happened to him, or how he had got into that corridor, or how long he'd been there. His daughter was not with him. That's the sentence that changed the next 4 hours of my life. His daughter was not with him. She had been in the van at the Texaco. The cashier confirmed the man had come in alone, but a neighbor later confirmed a child had been with Pryor when he left Metairie that evening, a 7-year-old named Cora. They found her at 4 a.m., 3 miles away, walking along the highway shoulder in the dark. She was fine, physically fine. She told the officers she had gotten out of the van to look for her father and started walking when she couldn't find him. She said she hadn't been afraid. She said a woman had walked with her for a while, kept her company. She described a woman in a pale coat. Dale Pryor never gave an explanation that made sense. He said he remembered getting out of the van to check his tire and then nothing until the officer's flashlights. Nobody could explain the corridor. It was locked from the maintenance side. The gate latch required a key. I drove home at 5 in the morning. I stopped at the same Texaco on the way because it was the only station on the exit, and I was nearly empty again. I bought a water, same brand, cold. I held it in my hand in the parking lot for a long time before I got in the car. I still coach the kids on form and scholarships and keeping their grades up. I still take the I-10 home on Friday nights. But I have not driven past that exit without thinking about Dale Pryor sitting in that corridor, behind a gate that required a key, with no memory of how he got there. I've tried to build a version of that night that makes sense. I've tried maybe 300 times. I haven't found one yet. I'm a forensic accountant from Indianapolis, and I have been doing this work for 19 years. My entire career is built on one principle. Numbers do not lie. Dates do not lie. Timestamps do not lie. I say this because when I tell you what happened, I need you to understand that I checked everything multiple times with the same methodology I would apply to a client's books, and I still cannot reconcile what I found. This was 14 months ago. I was driving back from a deposition in Cincinnati. Solo. No reason to rush. The kind of drive where you let the miles go by without counting them. I stopped at a BP station on Route 52 just outside of Lawrenceburg. It was around 7 p.m., still light, the sun sitting low and orange through the tree line. Completely ordinary stop. I filled the tank, went inside, bought a black coffee and a pack of peanut butter crackers. I always buy the same crackers on long drives, the orange ones, the Lance brand, 6 in a sleeve. My wife thinks it's a quirk. It's just what I eat when I'm driving. I paid cash. The cashier, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses, pushed up on her forehead, printed my receipt, and handed it to me with the crackers. I folded it in half without looking at it and pushed it into my shirt pocket. That's habit. I keep every receipt. 19 years of auditing will do that to you. I got back in the car, ate 2 of the crackers, finished most of the coffee, and drove the remaining hour and 40 minutes home. Pulled into my garage at 8:51 p.h. at 8:51 p.m. I remember the garage clock because I always check it. My wife goes to bed at 9 and I didn't want to wake her. The next morning, I emptied my shirt pocket onto the kitchen counter the way I do every morning. Cards, receipts, loose change, whatever accumulated the day before. The receipt from the BP fell out with the rest. I picked it up and looked at it. The timestamp read 11:43 p. I set it down, picked it up again, read it again, 11:43 p.m. Not 7:43 p.m. Not 7 something. Not even close to 7 something. The date was correct. The right day. The right month. The location code matched the Lawrenceburg BP. The items were correct. 1 coffee, 1 pack of crackers. The total was correct. Everything was correct except the time, which was wrong by nearly 5 hours. I pulled up my bank records. I had paid cash, so there was no card transaction to cross-reference. I checked my phone's location history. It showed me at that BP at 7:04 p.m., consistent with what I remembered. It showed me arriving home at 8:53 p.m. toused, 2 minutes off from the garage clock, which is normal. My location history showed a clean, unbroken line from the station to my driveway. An hour and 49 minutes. No gaps. No anomalies. I called the station the next day. I asked to speak to a manager and explained what I had. She was polite and said their register system occasionally had timestamp errors, that it was a known issue with their point-of-sale software, and that I shouldn't worry about it. I am not a person who accepts "shouldn't worry about it" as an answer. I asked her to pull the transaction log for that register for that evening. She said she'd call me back. She never did. I drove back to that BP 3 weeks later. I told the cashier at the counter, a different person, younger, that I'd stopped in about a month ago and had an issue with a receipt timestamp. I described the woman with the reading glasses on her forehead and asked if she still worked there. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "We haven't had anyone matching that description working here. Not since I started, and I've been here 2 years." I showed him the receipt. He looked at the timestamp. He looked at me. He said, "Our register doesn't generate timestamps in that format. We use a different system." I looked at the receipt. He was right. The font was slightly different from the other receipts in my pocket. The head oaf! The station address printed at the top was the right street, but the suite number was wrong, and when I checked later, that suite number didn't correspond to any business registered at that address. The items were right. The total was right. The location was close, but not exact. The timestamp was nearly 5 hours after I was there. The cashier who printed it didn't exist, according to the man who had worked that counter for 2 years. I have held that receipt in my hand more times than I can count. I have run every explanation I know how to run. Register malfunction doesn't explain the format discrepancy. A different receipt from a different stop doesn't explain that I only made 1 stop. A misprint doesn't explain the non-existent suite number. Here is the thing that I keep returning to. The thing I cannot audit my way out of. My location history shows me at that station for 11 minutes. I remember it as a 5-minute stop. Maybe 7. I bought 2 items, paid cash, exchanged 4 words with the cashier. 11 minutes is a long time for a 5-minute stop. I have no account of the other 4 to 6 minutes. None. And I am a person whose entire professional value rests on being able to account for every minute. I'm a child welfare caseworker from Tucson, and I've been doing this job for 11 years. I've sat across from people in the worst moments of their lives. I've learned to read a room in under 30 seconds, body language, eye contact, the specific way someone holds their hands when they're lying versus when they're afraid. I tell you this because what I saw that night was not ambiguous. I knew what I was seeing. I just couldn't get anyone else to see it in time. This was 7 months ago, a Wednesday evening in late October. I was driving back from a home visit in Marana, a long one, the kind that drains you flat, and I stopped at a quick trip on Ena Road around 6:30 p.m. Mana. Still light, barely, that grey-gold October light that makes everything look like it's already a memory. I needed gas, and I'd been running on nothing but institutional coffee since noon. I wanted something cold and something with sugar, and I wanted 5 minutes where I wasn't responsible for anyone. I pulled up to pump 6. The lot was busy for a Wednesday. 4 other cars, a pickup near the air station, a woman corralling 2 kids toward the entrance. Normal, the kind of scene you don't look at twice. Except I looked twice at the sedan 2 pumps over. It was a grey Honda Civic, maybe 10 years old, parked at pump 4 with the engine off and no one at the pump. The driver's side window was down, and in the back seat, behind the driver, a little girl was sitting completely rigid, both hands flat on her thighs, staring straight ahead. Not at her phone, not out the window, straight ahead, at the back of the seat in front of her. She looked about 9. She was wearing a school uniform, navy blue, white collar. Her hair was in 2 braids that had been neat earlier in the day and were coming loose now. I know what a child sitting still out of fear looks like. I know what it looks like versus bored, versus tired, versus sulking. I have sat across from enough of them, in enough rooms. That little girl was not bored. Every muscle in her body was working to stay perfectly, carefully still. I started pumping and watched her. 30 seconds, a full minute. She did not move, did not look around, did not do anything a child alone in a car does naturally. A man came out of the store, mid-40s, light jacket, paper cup in one hand and a bag in the other. He walked to the Civic and got in the driver's seat without going to the pump. He prepaid, or he wasn't getting gas at all, just using the lot. The moment his door closed, the girl flinched. Her shoulders came up toward her ears, and then she forced them back down. That deliberate, practiced suppression that takes a long time to learn. My chest went tight in a way that had nothing to do with my own fear. I looked at his plates. Even I looked at his face through the windshield as he started the car. Ordinary face, forgettable, the kind that doesn't stay. I looked at the girl one more time, and she was still staring straight ahead, and her hands were still flat on her thighs. He pulled out before I could decide what to do. That's the part I live with. I stood there with the pump in my hand, and I watched that grey Civic pull out of the lot and turn right on Ina Road and disappear into traffic, and I was still holding the pump handle. I called 911 from the lot. I gave them the plate number, the make and model, the direction of travel, the description of the girl and the man. The operator was professional and calm and told me a unit would be dispatched. She asked if I had witnessed any physical altercation. I said no. She asked if I had heard the child express distress. I said no. She took the information and told me they would follow up. I stood at that pump for another 10 minutes after I'd finished fueling, just standing there, running back through what I'd seen, looking for the version where I'd misread it. I've done this job for 11 years. I know the cost of over-reporting, and I know the cost of under-reporting. I've been wrong in both directions, and I know what wrong feels like. That did not feel wrong. I called my supervisor from the car. She told me I'd done the right thing by reporting it, and to let the police handle it. I drove home. I checked my phone every 20 minutes. Nobody called me back that night. I followed up the next morning. The officer I spoke to said the plates had come back registered to a 2014 Honda Civic belonging to a Raymond Cassidy, 44. No outstanding warrants, no prior reports. They had not located the vehicle, he said. Without evidence of a crime in progress, there was limited grounds for further action. I asked if anyone had checked on the child. He said they had not been able to make contact with the registered owner. I filed a formal report through my agency that afternoon, cross-referenced it with school attendance records for girls matching the description in the Marana and Tucson districts. My supervisor helped me run it. We found nothing that matched cleanly. 3 weeks later, I was back at that same quit trip. Same pump 6, same time of evening. Habit, I guess, or maybe something else. I looked at pump 4 the whole time I was filling my tank. I look at pump 4 every time I stop there now. I have not seen that car again. I have not seen that little girl again, but I keep my eyes open. I keep the plate number saved in my phone. I've typed it into search fields. I'm not sure I'm authorized to search. I've lost sleep over a child I spoke no words to and whose name I don't know. In 11 years of this work, I have never once felt like I did enough. That Wednesday in October made it worse, and I don't know how to put that down. I'm a delivery driver for a restaurant supply company out of Denver, and I'd been running the mountain routes for 5 years. I know every switchback, every turnout, every place where the guardrail looks solid and isn't. Out there, you learn pretty quick that you don't pass up gas, bathrooms, or coffee when you find them, because you don't know how long it'll be until the next one. This happened last January, during that cold snap when the temps dropped into single digits and stayed there. I'd left Steamboat Springs later than I should have after a delayed load-in, and by the time I was heading back toward Denver on 40, it was close to 1 a.m. The kind of cold where your breath freezes on the inside of the windshield if the defroster isn't on full blast. My fuel gauge was just under a quarter, and I needed to pee so badly my back teeth hurt. There's a little station just before you hit Bertha Pass. Not a chain, just a squat concrete box with 4 pumps, and a faded sign that just says, gas, diesel snacks. I'd stopped there a dozen times in daylight. I'd never stopped there at night. The lot was almost empty. One pickup with a plow rig parked off to the side. No one in it. A light dusting of snow already starting to cover the hood. The overhead lights above the pumps were yellow and dim, making the snowflakes look like they were falling slower than they really were. The store itself was lit up bright, but the glass on the door was so fogged from the temperature difference I couldn't see inside. I pulled up to a pump, left the engine running, habit in that kind of cold, and started filling the tank. The wind cut straight through my jacket. My fingers went numb through my gloves in under a minute. I decided I'd finish pumping, then go in, pay, and use the bathroom before the pass. By the time I screwed the cap back on, I was shivering hard enough that my jaw ached. I jogged to the door and pushed it open. The warmth hit me first, then the smell, stale coffee, old mop water, fryer grease from some long-gone hot food program. There was a man behind the counter, maybe late 50s, wearing a flannel shirt and a name tag that just said A. He looked up like I'd startled him, even though the bell over the door had chimed. "Pump 2, I said, stomping snow off my boots. "And can I get the bathroom key?" He hesitated. Actually hesitated. His eyes flicked toward the back of the store and then back to me. "Bathroom's out of order," he said. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other. "You sure? It's kind of an emergency." "Out of order," he repeated. His voice was flat, but there was something under it. Something tight. He reached for the register, rang up the fuel, told me the total. I paid, still half dancing in place, and finally said, "Look, I just saw a guy come out of there when I pulled in. Can't be that out of order." Because I had. When I first turned into the lot, I'd seen the side door near the back of the building open, and a man in a dark jacket step out, zip up, and walk around toward the pumps before I'd lost sight of him behind the corner. He hadn't reappeared at any of the pumps. I hadn't seen him leave. I hadn't seen his vehicle. Al's jaw clenched. "Just a flicker. We keep that door locked at night," he said. "Nobody's supposed to be back there." I felt the first little spike of unease push through the urgency. "Well, someone was," I said. He came out like he knew exactly where everything was. Al stared at me a long second, then sighed, like whatever argument he'd been having in his head was over. He bent down, rummaged under the counter, and came up with an old wooden board with a key attached to it by a chain. The board was about the size of a cutting board, stained dark in the middle like it had been handled 1,000 times with greasy hands. "Fine," he said, "but you go in, you do your business, you come right back. If anything looks off, you come right back. You understand?" It sounded absurd as he said it, but his eyes were dead serious. I nodded, took the board, and felt the weight of it in my hand as I headed toward the back hallway. The air got a little colder with each step away from the counter. The bathroom was down a short corridor lined with old promotional posters, all sun-faded advertising brands they probably didn't even stock anymore. The door to the men's room was at the end on the right. The key slid into the lock with a stiffness that said it didn't get used often. I turned it, felt the bolt give, and pushed the door open. The first thing that hit me was the sound. Not a drip, not a fan, not the buzz of a fluorescent. It was a soft, wet, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled slowly across tile. It stopped the second the door opened, like whatever was making it had been listening. I stood in the doorway, and my whole body balked. The light was on, the single harsh bulb in a fixture overhead, but it didn't reach all the corners. The mirror above the sink was cracked in a spiderweb pattern. There was a stall at the far end, with the door half open, just enough that I couldn't see if anyone was in it from where I was. "Hello?" My voice sounded wrong in there, too loud and too thin at the same time. No answer. I told myself it was a plow guy washing off his boots earlier, dragging them across the floor. I told myself it was pipes. Old buildings make bad sounds. I've been in enough to know that. I stepped inside and the smell hit me. Bleach and something metallic underneath it, like someone had tried very hard to scrub something away and hadn't quite managed it. My bladder didn't care about my unease. I made myself move toward the urinal. The tile under my boots felt slick, even though it looked dry. Halfway there, I saw it. A single wet streak on the floor, starting at the base of the stall and arcing toward the drain in the center of the room. Not a puddle, not splatter. A streak, about the width of 3 fingers, darker than the surrounding tile. It was recent. It hadn't started to dry at the edges. My chest went cold before my brain named it. I stopped moving. Every part of me went still, the way it does when you hear a noise in your house at night that doesn't belong to the house. The half-open stall door didn't move. The light buzzed. The room felt like it was holding its breath. I took one step backward, then another. I kept my eyes on that stall door and on the gap under it, watching for any shift of shadow. There wasn't one. I backed all the way to the doorway, reached behind me blindly for the handle, and pulled the door shut without turning my back on the room. The lock clicked. I turned the key, pulled it out, and walked fast. Not running, but close. Back down the hallway to the counter. All watched me the whole way. He didn't ask if everything was okay. He just said, "You saw it." It wasn't a question. I heard something, I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "And there's something on the floor." "Yeah," he said quietly. His face had gone a little gray. I told them it wasn't right to keep it open. They won't listen. Keep what open? He shook his head like he regretted saying anything. Guy got killed in there 3 winters ago. Drifter. Came in half frozen. Picked a fight with another regular. Other guy shoved him. He went down, hit his head on the edge of the sink, bled out before they could get an ambulance up the pass. We closed the bathroom for a while. Then the owner decided we couldn't afford to lose the traffic. People won't stop if they can't pee. He glanced past me toward the back hallway, then back. First time I opened it again, that streak was on the floor. Same place. I mopped it. Next night it was back. I stopped looking after a while. I wanted to tell him it was a plumbing issue, that the building was sweating condensation along some tile seam, that the bleach smell was from a recent deep clean. I wanted there to be an explanation that fit in a box I knew how to stack. Instead, I heard myself ask. And the sound? He flinched. It was small, but I saw it. "Sometimes I hear it when I'm counting out the drawer," he said, dragging, like somebody trying to get up and not quite making it. He looked at me, eyes serious. "That's why I don't like giving out the key after midnight." "You still do, though?" He gave a humorless little shrug. "Guys like you don't take no for an answer when they're desperate. And I can't exactly tell them. The bathroom's haunted." I handed the board with the key back to him. My hand left a faint damp print on the wood from where I'd been gripping it. I made it over the pass fine. Got home at 3 in the morning. Fell into bed without telling my wife anything about it. It felt stupid to say out loud. I deal in pallets and invoices, not ghosts. But I haven't used a bathroom in a mountain gas station since. Not once in 5 years. I've pulled over on the side of the road in a snowstorm instead. Hazard lights blinking. Praying no one barrels into the back of the truck. I've risked that because I would rather stand in freezing wind on the shoulder of 40 than step into another tiled room at the back of a station and hear that sound again. The part that sticks with me isn't the story about the drifter. It's that Al knew what I had seen without me describing it. That he said, "You saw it," like it was one thing, singular, the same for everyone. I don't know what I would have seen if I'd pushed that stall door all the way open, and I think not knowing is the only reason I'm still able to stop for gas at all. I'm a radio technician from Albuquerque, and I've been fixing other people's signal problems for almost 15 years. Most of my work is routers and broadcast equipment now, but I started out climbing towers in the desert, tracking down interference with a handheld scanner and a notebook. If there's one thing I trust, it's what the meters say. Signals don't have opinions. This happened late last August. I was driving back from a site call in a tiny place called Vaughan, one of those towns that's basically an intersection with a couple of buildings around it, and it was close to 2 a.m. I took the 285 down toward Klein's Corners because I know there's a 24-hour station there. I like that one because their pumps usually work and because the lot is big and open. You can see anything coming from far off. I pulled in, took pump 8 near the outer edge of the lot, and left the engine running with the radio off. That's my habit after long days. Silence. I stepped out, swiped my card, and started fueling. The air was warm, but the kind of high desert warm that cools off fast, and the sky was so clear you could see the Milky Way above the canopy lights. That's when my scanner started hissing. I keep a small wideband scanner clipped to the passenger visor. It's on for almost every drive, background noise, habit, same way some people keep music on. It scans local law enforcement, emergency, a couple of amateur bands. When I got out at the pump, it was quiet. Now it was full of static, not just a little, hiss between channels, full, dense white noise, the kind you get when you're parked under a bad transformer or next to a station with a blown ground. I glanced through the window. The scanner display showed it had stopped scanning. It had latched onto a signal at 146. 520 national simplex calling for hams, but the meter showed nothing intelligible, just solid static. I frowned and looked around. The lot was almost empty. One semi-idling on the far side, a sedan at a pump closer to the store. Nobody near me. No overhead transmission lines close enough to matter. No visible antennas other than the store's little Wi-Fi dish. I reached through the open driver's window, picked up the scanner, and held it in my hand. The volume was low, but the noise was thick enough that I could feel it more than hear it, like pressure in my ears. Out of habit, I lifted the antenna a little higher. The signal meter jumped to full scale. The static shifted, just enough that my brain wanted to make words out of it, and couldn't. I stepped back from the truck, still holding the scanner, and took a slow walk around pump 8. 3 steps to the left, meter dropped. 3 steps to the right, it pinned again. I did it twice, then 3 times, then started marking spots in my head like I was mapping a dead zone at a job. Whatever was causing that noise wasn't the semi or the store, it was the pump. More specifically, it was the column of air about 2 feet to the right of the pump, where a person would stand if they were facing it. I know how that sounds. I know how it felt. My hand stayed steady, but the skin on my arms crawled like I'd walked through a spiderweb. I told myself there was probably a bad ballast in the canopy light directly above. Malfunctioning electronics throw noise, and I've seen worse. Except the canopy light above pump 8 was off. Burned out. It had been for months. I remembered because I complained about it to the cashier once. The pump had its own little rectangle of light around the display, but above me was nothing but the dark underside of the canopy, and the stars beyond it. I moved closer to the pump, holding the scanner in front of me like a divining rod. The noise got louder, sharper, like it had teeth. The meter held solid. I extended my arm into the space where someone would stand. The noise cut out, not fully. It didn't go quiet. It went thin, like something had stepped away from the microphone. I pulled my arm back. The static roared. I held my breath and did it again, slower this time. Arm out. Noise drops. Arm in. Noise returns to full. I repeated that 3 times, watching the meter. There was a pattern, the kind of pattern you only get when something's interacting with the field, not just causing it. That's when a second thing happened. The fuel pump clicked. The handle in my other hand jumped like it does when the tank is full, the auto shut-off kicking in. I looked at the display. It read 0. 0, 0. I stared at it. I had been standing there for at least 30 seconds, distracted, but I knew I'd already pumped a few gallons. I remember watching the numbers climb past 3, 74. Now it said 0, 0, 0 gallons, 0, 0, 1, like it had never started. My hand on the handle felt wrong, numb, like my palm had gone to sleep. I let go and racked the nozzle. The hose felt heavier than it should have. The scanner in my other hand screamed static. I went inside. The cashier on duty was a kid, maybe 20, nose ring, hoodie, the kind of person who says hey instead of hello. I told him Pump 8 had just kicked off and the display had reset while I was fueling. He frowned, glanced at the monitor and said, "We don't have a Pump 8. I thought he was messing with me. I told him again. Far right pump, outer edge of the lot, under the dead canopy light. That's 7, he said. Other side 6. We only got the 1 row. There's no 8. He flipped the little diagram taped to the counter toward me. Someone had drawn the pump layout with a Sharpie. 1 through 4 on the inner row, 5 through 7 on the outer. No 8. The far right pump where I'd parked was labeled 7. I looked out the window. From that angle, I could see my truck. I could see the back half of the pump behind it, the number on the column, in black on white. I didn't argue with him. I just asked him to authorize the pump again under whatever number you see for that one and went back out. My heartbeat felt wrong. Not fast, not slow, but off, like it was miscounting. Back at the truck, the scanner was quiet. The meter showed no signal. I set it on the seat, picked up the handle again and started fueling. The display read 01, 01, then 002, like nothing strange had happened. I watched every tenth of a gallon climb like it meant something. When I hit the amount I knew I needed to get home with margin, I stopped. I did not top off. I did not wait for the auto shut off. When I hung the nozzle back, the entire column shuddered. Just once, like someone had leaned on it from the other side. I didn't sleep well that night. I dreamed in static. 2 days later, I came back through Klein's Corners on a daytime run. Sun high, lot busy, everything ordinary. I pulled in out of curiosity more than need and parked off to the side, out of the way. There were 6 pumps in the forecourt, 3 on the inner row, 3 on the outer, all of them numbered 1 through 6. The space where pump 7 and 8 had been was empty concrete. No fresh cuts in the pavement, no sign of recent removal, just a faint rectangular ghost in the concrete where something heavy had once sat for a long time. I went inside, different kid at the counter. I asked casually if they'd removed any pumps recently. He shook his head. Been like this since I started. 2 years. I went back out and stood on the bare concrete where my truck had been 2 nights before. The scanner on my belt was silent. The signal meter flatlined. I told myself I was tired, that I'd mixed up my exits, that I pulled into a different station on a different night. I pulled my receipts when I got home. 1 from that night. Klein's Corners, pump 8. I checked the timestamp, 1:47 a.m. I checked my dash cam later. It showed my truck parked in an empty space of concrete, no pump visible in the frame. Just a hose snaking into view from the left side, hanging in midair. I still do that route. I still stop for gas, but I don't let my tank drop below half in that part of the state anymore. And if I do have to stop at that station, I don't park anywhere near the end of the row. I can't prove what I experienced. I can't reconcile the video with the receipt, with the layout that's been the same for 2 years, according to 2 different employees. Every part of me that trusts instruments and diagrams is at war with what my hand remembers holding. And sometimes, on other jobs, when I'm standing under a tower listening to the scanner sing with interference, there's a split second where the noise shifts and my body tenses before my brain does, because for just that heartbeat, it sounds exactly like what I heard by the invisible pump. I'm a hotel night auditor from Kansas City, but before this job, I spent 8 years managing convenience stores off the interstate. Graveyard shifts mostly. If you've never worked nights at a gas station, you don't know how thin the world feels between midnight and 4 a.m. The glass stops feeling solid. The parking lot feels like a stage someone forgot to sweep. You see the best and worst of people through a pane of glass and a drawer that slides. What I'm about to tell you is the reason I don't work those shifts anymore. It happened at a station off I-70 near Salina. I won't say the chain because the company still exists, and honestly, so does the station, As far as I know, I was 29 then, working as the overnight manager. We were short-staffed, so most nights it was just me, one person running the register, doing the paperwork, restocking, cleaning the bathrooms, all of it. The station sat by itself, on an exit that mostly served truckers and the occasional lost family. The kind of place you only see because you missed the better exits 10 miles back. I had a ritual that kept me sane on those shifts. Every night between 2 and 2:15 MR, when there were usually no customers, I'd pour myself a fresh cup of coffee, do a slow walk around the inside perimeter of the store, and then stand by the front window for exactly one full song on the overhead radio. I'd watch the pumps, the highway, the empty road leading to the little industrial park down the hill. I told myself it was security, but really, it was just a way to remind myself the world still existed beyond the fluorescent aisles. That ritual is important, because it's the detail I can't carry the same way anymore. This was in late November, 5 years ago. Cold, but not snowing yet. It was a Tuesday night going into Wednesday. I remember because Tuesdays were inventory nights, and I hated doing inventory alone. The shift had been normal. A couple of truckers buying coffee and cigarettes. A minivan full of teenagers on their way back from some game. One woman on her way to Denver, who spent 10 minutes comparing energy drinks before picking the exact same one everyone else picks. Around 1045 Amin, the traffic tapered off to nothing. The highway sound outside turned into a distant hush instead of individual engines. I did the trash, wiped the counters, checked the bathrooms. At 2003, I checked the clock, I remember that number exactly, poured my coffee, and started my nightly walk. I went down the snack aisle, up the refrigerated wall, past the coffee station and the lottery tickets. Everything was where it should be, nothing out of place. No customers, no headlights in the lot. I ended up at the front window, just as a song on the radio started. Some soft rock thing everyone's heard 1,000 times, but nobody can name. I leaned my shoulder against the glass and took a sip of the coffee. Outside, the parking lot looked like a photograph. 4 pumps, all empty. The overhead canopy lights buzzing faintly. The big sign by the exit flashing our gas price every few seconds. Beyond that, the highway. A dark strip with the occasional pair of headlights sweeping past. To the left, the access road sloping down to the industrial park, where a handful of streetlights glowed over dark buildings. Then the radio cut out. Not a fade, not a glitch. It stopped like someone had hit a mute button in the ceiling. 1 second there was music. The next second there was nothing but the hum of the coolers and the faint rattle of the HVAC. Silence in a store like that is wrong. There is always some sound, compressor, radio, a distant engine. This felt like somebody had taken a thick blanket and dropped it over the whole building. My chest tightened, the way it does when you walk into a room and everyone stops talking at once. I turned toward the speakers, then toward the back office to check the receiver. That's when I saw the car at pump 3. It hadn't been there 10 seconds earlier. I would swear to that in court. 1 second, 4 empty pumps. The next, a dark blue sedan at pump 3, nose toward the store, driver side closest to the building. No headlights on, no engine sound, just there. I froze with the coffee halfway to my mouth. My first thought, stupidly, was that I must have missed it, pulling in because I'd been looking at the speakers. But there hadn't been headlights sweeping across the lot. No engine approaching, no door chime. The sedan's windows were tinted just dark enough that I couldn't see clearly inside from that angle. There was no one standing at the pump, no one walking toward the store, no movement at all. The silence pressed harder. I set the coffee down on the ledge by the window without taking my eyes off the car. We had a camera monitor behind the counter that showed all 4 pumps, the entrance and the register area. I backed up slowly, keeping the sedan in view until the last second, and reached behind me for the little swinging half door that separated the customer side from the employee side. When I glanced up at the monitor, my stomach dropped. Pump 3 was empty. On screen, pump 1, 2, 3, 4, all 4 islands clear, lot empty. No sedan, no headlights, nothing. I looked back out the window. The car was still there. Same angle, same distance. From where I stood, I could see the side mirror and the curve of the rear door, dark blue paint reflecting the canopy lights. I looked from the window to the monitor, back to the window, back to the monitor. Once, twice, a third time. Empty lot on the monitor. Car at pump 3 in front of my eyes. My hand started tingling, that pins and needles sensation you get when circulation cuts off. I shook them out, as if that would do anything about what I was seeing. I was not sleep deprived. I was not hallucinating. I'd worked worse shifts on less rest than that. I know the way my vision goes when I'm truly exhausted. That soft blur at the edges, the way you miss steps on the stairs. This was not that. I picked up the phone behind the counter and lifted the receiver, more for the comfort of the wait than from any plan. I dialed 9 and then stopped, my finger hovering over the next one. What exactly was I planning to say? There's a car that only exists if I'm not looking at the monitor. Even in my own head it sounded insane. I set the phone down. The radio crackled back to life overhead, cutting into the silence mid-chorus. I jumped. Out the window, the sedan's brake lights flared once, briefly, bathing the concrete in red. Then they went dark again. The car didn't move. The engine never turned over. Something in me decided I needed a second angle. We had a side window near the coffee station that looked out toward pumps 3 and 4 from a different direction. If I walked along the far aisle, I could see the car from closer up, without walking straight out the front door. I left the register, rounded the end cap of the chips aisle, and made my way to the side window. Each step felt too loud on the tile. The music playing overhead sounded thin, far away. At the window, I pressed my hand lightly against the glass and leaned forward. The sedan was gone. Pump 3 was empty. Pump 4 was empty. The concrete where the car had been was bare, no vehicle, no tire tracks, nothing. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I let it out in a shaky exhale that fobbed the glass. I stayed there for another 30 seconds, scanning the lot, expecting to see taillights at the exit or a car pulling onto the highway. Nothing. Just the empty pumps and the sodium vapor glow. I told myself I was on edge from inventory, that I'd missequenced what I saw, car pulling out, then radio glitch, not the other way around. Brains miss time events all the time. I'd read about that somewhere. I went back to the counter, picked up my coffee, and tried to make myself finish my song at the window ritual the way I always did. Normalcy, routine. My eyes drifted to the monitor again. Pump 3 was no longer empty. On the screen, where it had been clear before, the sedan now sat at the pump. Dark blue, nose toward the store, driver's side closest. No headlights, no figure at the pump. I felt something in my throat that I didn't want to call panic. The picture quality on the monitor wasn't great, but it was good enough to make out shapes, motion. On the monitor, the car was there, out the window. The spot was empty. My vision tunneled. The edges of the store fell away. It was just me. The hum of the coolers, the too loud radio, the blank concrete outside, the very real car on the black and white screen. I did what I always do when I don't understand something. I started checking. First check. Timestamps. The monitor overlay showed the correct date and time in the corner. 2009 a.m. I looked at the clock above the cigarettes. 2009 a.m. Second check. Other angles. I flipped through the camera views. Pump cluster. Front door. Aisle 3. Back hallway. Every angle that should have shown that patch of concrete showed the sedan parked there. From every camera, Pump 3 was occupied. Third check, reflection. I looked at the front window, not at the lot beyond it, but at the reflection of the monitor in the glass. In the reflection, the little box that showed the pump cameras looked like the real lot, car and door. In the actual lot beyond the glass, there was nothing. I don't know how long I stood there, going back and forth between the window and the screens. Long enough that my coffee went cold in my hand. Long enough that the song ended and another one started and I didn't register either. Eventually I did something I'm not proud of. I went to the back office, shut the door, and pulled the blinds down over the little interior window that looked out toward the counter. I told myself I needed to check the DVR. Our cameras recorded, and you could scrub back a couple hours. I told myself that if I saw the car pull in on the recording, then I could chalk it up to a glitch, with the front window glass or some freak lighting issue. I sat down at the desk, pulled the keyboard toward me, and brought up the playback controls. My fingers shook enough that I had trouble hitting the right keys. I rewound the pump camera feedback 10 minutes and pressed play. Empty lot. All 4 pumps. No cars, no movement. 2001 Aman. A pickup pulled in at pump 1. Gassed up. Left. I watched the whole transaction. Normal. At 2005, the lot was empty again. At 2006-2013, I wrote that number down later. The picture glitched. For one frame, less than a second, the image smeared, like somebody had dragged their finger down a wet painting. The pumps stretched. The canopy seemed to bend. And for that sliver of time, there were too many lines where there should have been 4 columns. Then, the picture snapped back, and the sedan was just there at pump 3, as if it had always been there. No approach. No headlights entering frame. One frame, empty lot. Next frame, car. I scrubbed back and forth over that transition a dozen times. Same thing every time. No fade, no gradual appearance. Just not there, then there. I switched to the front door camera. Same thing. At 2006-13, the view warped. A ripple of static rolled down the screen, and then the sedan appeared when nothing had been a heartbeat before. I remembered something then that made my mouth go dry. In that exact moment, in real time, I had been standing at the window, coffee in hand, listening to the radio cut out. On the playback, the audio track from the cameras showed a faint hum from the coolers, the occasional crack of the compressor cycling. At 2006-13, the hum cut out. Total silence on the recording for exactly 3 seconds. Then it came back, along with the sedan. I might have been able to live with it if the car had just left. If at some point it had driven off frame. If I could point to the pixelated taillights on screen and tell myself, there, it's done. But that's not what happened. I sat there and watched myself on the recording. At 2007 something, my own reflection appeared in the front window on camera, styrofoam cup in hand. I watched my tiny monochrome self turn toward the pumps. I watched myself jerk slightly when the radio cut out on that timeline, even though I couldn't hear it now. I watched myself stare at the sedan for a solid 20 seconds, and in all that time, the car did not open. No door moved. No figure emerged. The driver's window stayed dark. Then at 2008-41, the picture smeared again. Empty lot. No sedan. My reflection still in the glass, cup in hand, staring at nothing. On the recording, the car never drove in and never drove out. It was just there between 2 glitches, existing for barely over 2 minutes of footage. I sat back hard. My chair bumped the filing cabinet. My heart was hammering so loud, it drowned out the real-time hum of the office. I did not check the cameras facing the aisles. I did not check the back hallway feed. I would like to tell you I was brave enough to look for answers in every angle, but I wasn't. I closed the playback window and sat there with my hands on my knees until my breathing slowed. Eventually, I stood up, opened the office door, and went back out to the front. The window was just a window again. The lot was empty. The radio was playing something forgettable. My cold coffee sat on the ledge where I'd left it. I dumped it in the trash. The rest of the shift passed in a kind of grey fog. A couple more truckers, a guy buying scratch-offs, a woman who asked for the bathroom key. I gave it to her without telling her anything. I didn't look at the pump cameras again unless I absolutely had to. I did my paperwork. I balanced the drawer. When the morning person came in at 6, I told her it had been a quiet night. I went home, lay down, and did not sleep. I tried to rationalize it 100 ways. Bad DVR. Some kind of test pattern I didn't know about. Prank. Optical illusion between the glass and the monitor. My brain misfiring after too many years of neon and caffeine. Then, 2 weeks later, the regional manager came in. He was doing his usual quarterly audits, paperwork, counts, a spot check of the cameras. I watched him from behind the counter as he sat in the office clicking through feeds. He looked bored until poker end. There was a moment where his posture changed, just slightly, the way people sit up when something catches their attention. He leaned closer to the screen, clicked, rewound, watched. Bill, Then he closed the window, stood up, and came out to the counter with a neutral smile back on his face. "Everything looks good," he said, like nothing was wrong. "You're doing a solid job here." He paused. "Has anything strange happened on overnights lately?" I swallowed. "What do you mean?" "Equipment issues," he said. "Glitches, unusual customers." His eyes flicked to the window, then to the pump monitor, then back to me. I lied. "No," I said. "Just the usual." He nodded slowly, like he didn't entirely believe me, but also didn't want me to say more. On his way out, he put his hand on the door handle, hesitated, and said without turning around, "If you ever feel uncomfortable out here at night, document it, in detail, and let me know." Then he left. I handed in my notice 3 weeks later. Officially, I said I wanted a job with more predictable hours. Unofficially, I didn't want to be in that building between midnight and 4 a.m. ever again. I don't know what that car was. I don't know if it was a glitch in the cameras, in my brain, in the building. I don't know why it only existed between 2 smears of static. I don't know whether there was someone in it or not. What I do know is this: I still have the printout of that night's pump report. Each transaction is logged by time, pump number, and amount. I've checked it more times than I can count. There is no entry for pump 3 between 2:00 and 2:13:30 but when I close my eyes, I can still see the way the brake lights flared once, for no one in a car that never paid and never arrived. I don't stop at interstate gas stations after 10 p.m. anymore. I tell myself it's because of safety, because of crime, because it's just smart. The truth is simpler and harder. I don't want to look up from a register someday and see a car that only exists on one side of the glass.